Howdy, folks. We are coming to you live via the internet right now. My name is Mr. Mankey. I am the college and career counselor at McHenry High School, and we are going to talk with you today about freshman future planning, particularly if you are a parent or a guardian and you have a student at the McHenry High School freshman campus. So welcome today. If you're watching live, we welcome you with the live viewership. If you're watching through the recording, we are also glad that you are engaging as well. I will say, before we get the intros and all that stuff, for those of you watching live, you're watching this on YouTube, and like with any YouTube video, there is a comment section right below the video. You can type questions or feedback. If you want to give us maybe positive affirmations, we'll accept those as well. You could type those into the comments. We can see them and we can actually engage with you that way. We can answer questions during the presentation. You can always save them to the end as well. But if you want to throw a question at us halfway through, just type it right there into the comments and we can respond to you. So once again, welcome to our Freshman Future Planning live stream. It's not just me with you today, folks. I got a couple esteemed partners. Mr. Boshin, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Mr. Boshin. I am one of the freshman counselors working with students with last names A through LE.
And Miss Z?
Hi, I'm Miss Stephanie Sarignana, school counselor. I have the lower half of the alphabet, LF through Z, and I work with our multilingual students.
Excellent, excellent. On the right side of the screen there, we also have the administrators that the freshman campus team works with the closest. Kyle Hobson, the assistant principal at the freshman campus, who kind of takes care of the day-to-day operations over there. Mrs. Patrice Frederick, who is our immediate supervisor. She's the assistant principal of student services. And then Dr. Jeff Prickett, who is the principal of McHenry High School, which includes both campuses. So here's kind of what we're going to run through with you today. We're going to hit some resources. We're going to talk a little bit about possible future courses, and as well as some post-secondary resources, options, things that can help you out along the way, I should say. I think I'm kicking things over to Miss Z here, right? There we go.
That's me. Well, again, welcome everybody. Excited to kind of share with you a little bit about the freshman campus and how we can best support your student moving forward their next 3.5 years now. Oh, can't believe it, almost the end of the semester, which, as you can see on this slide, shows our semester does end December 21st. So finals for the freshman campus are the 21st and the 22nd. And the 22nd is that last day. You'll see here are just some academic supports listed. I'll review them here with you as well, just to get a little idea of what they are, how your student can access them, and so on for the remainder of the year. We have AIM period, right? So that is our first period of the day. It runs right before our periods 1 through 8 and is what all freshmen here start out with. We do also have AIM at the upper campus that is a little bit later in the morning. I personally love that AIM is that first hour of the day, kind of gets the kids started in a good mindset to have a good day moving forward. But this is an open support period that students are, in fact, assigned a classroom and a teacher. So almost like I tell the kids usually, like a homeroom, you have a classroom that you are to report to. But the beauty of AIM is that most of our core content teachers do have an AIM classroom and are available during this time. It is 35 minutes. And so a nice example I like to give to students is, say you are struggling in a class or you need to make up that math quiz that you had missed yesterday because you were sick. AIM is a time where you can do this. We encourage our students to reach out to our teachers and vice versa, to have kids visit them during their AIM. So even if I'm assigned to one teacher, I can essentially request a pass to go see my math teacher during AIM, let's say the next morning. And the idea is that it's kind of this like open space for students to bounce between their teachers and ask for help in whatever they may need. Right below that is our paper program. It is a 24/7 tutoring program that the school actually has bought for our freshmen. We tested out last year, and now it is open to most students. This is I would say, a very nice setup when you are at home. And I tell kids, if mom or dad can help you out and we're struggling with something, paper is definitely a go-to. within that first, I want to say it was about the third week of school, all of our core teachers presented paper to our students, and each student had to utilize paper in some way, shape, or form in relation to an assignment or an assessment or an essay of some kind. So students have been taught how to log in, how to access paper. The tutor is actually a live person on the other end. It's not just a computer. And the other side to that is that they aren't just giving them the answers, because I know that's kind of like our fear, right? Like, is my student learning? Are they just getting the answers on this chat? And the reality is they are not. The tutor uses kind of like a Socratic formula to answer and help students find the answer on their own. Under that is our Learning Forward program. This is our after school support. This support runs Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays, except for Wednesday early release days, which are about 2 times a month. On those days, students can report to the library directly at the end of the school day. It runs between 2:45 up until 4:05 p.m. This is more of just like a nice designated space where students can essentially get some work done. If we know they struggle with finding a space or being distracted at home, for example, by their phones, Netflix, whatever it may be. This gives them kind of like a set time immediately after school to get some of that work done. And so at times we do have some teachers in there kind of just walking around, seeing if anybody needs any additional support, but it's really this just kind of like central focal time to get whatever work they can done. A lot of times in talking with students, they appreciate or maybe don't even realize the amount of work they're able to complete within that hour, because then they're kind of more laser focused on stuff. Under that, we have our OTC, which is our On Track Center. This is more kind of like a higher tier level based support, more of one-to-one. We usually address this and any specific students in our tier 3 team, which consists of our counselors, social workers, psychologists, administrations, and deans and special education department. So this is just kind of like another level of support that I would say on the school side, we identify students and would at times place in. All freshmen here at our freshman campus are actually starting out with that lunch study. So that final academic support time. The notion is that everybody starts with a lunch study, and each time we pull progress report grades, any students that are earning a C and up get pulled out of lunch study and receive that full lunch. Lunch study is half of their lunch period, whether that's the first half or the second half. It just depends on the schedule. So it's 20 minutes of lunch study, 20 minutes of lunch. Students with D's and F's are expected to obviously be doing some kind of work during that lunch study time that's already built in. We use this as kind of, again, like a motivator to, okay, let's get your grade ups before the next grade pool so that you are able to receive a full lunch. This next slide will go over some people that in our last night presentation, we made clear, aren't here with us in person, but are actually within our Office of Student Services here at the freshman campus. So social emotional learning supports. We have Mrs. Maura Reed. She's our prevention and wellness coordinator for the district. So she bounces between both buildings, addressing kind of more of that higher need support, but also puts on more of that prevention programming within both buildings. She will come to lunch hours and kind of run some awareness, some stress relief, resources for students to definitely utilize. Mrs. Veronica Eggert is our social worker here. She is also located in the same office as myself and Mr. Boshin. We have this year a social work intern that works alongside of her, Mrs. Alexis Carter. She is here on Wednesdays and Fridays. So typically on those days when we have students come down, she's kind of like really the first go and first contact for those kids. This year, we are so excited to have a full-time psych. She is Miss Christine Nichols. She is also located in our office and is equally as trained to, if something comes up, address those social emotional learning needs for our students. Oh, our daunting slide here. Not as daunting, we promise. 4-year course planning. Let's get into it, Mr. Mankey. That's what I was going to say. Over the course of the past about week or so, myself, Mr. Boshin, and Mr. Mankey have actually been doing some programming within your students' English classes. So we had 2 days with each English class here at the freshman campus to talk a little bit and start getting that ball rolling on what's our overall goal come senior year. Now, don't worry, we didn't go in telling them they have to have their future figured out right now, because that's definitely and certainly not the case. As a 14-year-old, we understand that their interests change over time, and what they might want to do as they progress through their high school career, will also mirror that as well, that change. And so ninth grade year is more of our imagine year, that we call it. Mr. Mankey will go over a nice little acronym that he created as the college and career counselor to kind of set this basis for students of what we're looking, to promote and hope to help them with each year throughout high school. You'll see in the green boxes our focus of course, the ninth grade year here at the freshman campus. And our idea is in goal is to make sure that our students are earning a minimum of 6 credits at the end of the year. These are essentially listed the requirements. We too review this information with your freshman student just recently. So if you ask, they should say they remember or can recall this information. And so the idea is just to imagine and also understand why our core classes and the classes that they must take, how that impacts them in the future, but also what that means in earning their high school diploma. Dual credit and AP courses. This was definitely a slide we also presented to your students during their English classes about what opportunities we have here at the freshman level that will definitely propel them moving forward. And I think will definitely be an added benefit for students that are thinking of either that community college or 4-year college route. We have available here to our students dual credit and AP courses. So the difference between these two, I'll explain here for you. Dual credit courses is the ability, and essentially both of these provide the ability for our students to concurrently earn college credit while here at McHenry High School. We offer 2 dual credit classes at the freshman level. There are, of course, an abundance more we offer once they head on over to the upper campus for next year. Our 2 dual credit classes here that we offer are our metals class and our computer literacy class. So students obviously participate in the class, earn an appropriate grade. The courses are taught here at the high school for free. At times there's a small minimum fee associated potentially with like computer literacy, but obviously not the same amount of tuition they would typically have to pay had they were to take the course at MCC. Once earning that grade and completing the course, they would then receive essentially credit from the high school. So that would be on their transcript, but they'd also start building and receive a transcript with a grade from McHenry County College. So kind of that's where that dual part comes into play of here's a transcript from the high school and here's another one that you will start to get and build with MCC. So the idea is then in hopes that our students really push themselves to take dual credit courses and where they could end up earning an abundance of college credit during their high school career. On the flip side of this, you'll see for AP courses, this is, again, a way to earn college credit that's a little bit different. The one AP course that we have here at the freshman building is AP Human Geography. And again, there's a greater list, obviously, when our students enter the upper campus for next year. An AP course is a course that the student takes, and teacher is equally as trained to obviously teach our students and educate our students on this course in hopes to prepare them to take what's called the AP exam come spring within that specific content. So students they don't necessarily have to, but they can sign up to take that AP course usually it's in the spring, at the end of the school year. AP course provides a score between 1 and 5 is how it gets graded. Any student that receives a 3 and up, all Illinois public schools must give credit to that student in some way, shape, or form. So what's nice about this is I tell the kids, it's not necessarily you're building a transcript, but you get to come to, meet your college counselor, wherever that may be, and say, hey, I scored a 4 on my AP Human Geography exam. What are you going to give me in return? And typically they'll give students credit for those kind of maybe 100 or 2 level classes in the college level. And then essentially, they could potentially graduate early or pursue multiple degrees if they wish to do so. Again, taking the classes in hopes to prepare them to score, obviously, a 3 and up on that actual test. Did I miss anything, you two, in silence over here? No? Okay.
Couldn't have said it better.
All right. Just want to make sure. Okay, our pathways. So again, To refer back to our recent English presentations, we actually worked with your students in completing a career interest assessment or inventory. It was actually through the MCC website. And although we tell the kids this is obviously not a crystal ball into what you have to do as far as what the plan is after high school, but gives a good idea and kind of guides our students to the direction of selecting appropriate classes at the high school level. I always like to tell students, we want you to be in classes that you would enjoy and something that would maybe go along with a potential pathway you're hoping to pursue. And on the flip side of that, I usually say, if you come to me and you say you're going to be a teacher and you take child development and it's not for you, that's great. We can then cross that off the list and move forward and see what we think might be a better fit for your student. So we had our students think back to those potential career clusters that they ended up matching with based on the assessment, and looking at this slide here in identifying some pathways of courses that we provide here at the high school level. I feel like students always typically forget that world language is a pathway, and a pathway is just kind of that one class that builds off of the other to kind of reach that end goal of either that AP or honors course, so to speak. So world language, after Spanish 1, you take Spanish 2 and then 3 with the hopes of then taking 4. And so that's how that pathway was explained to the kids. And that, each of these pathways, there's a succession of classes that kind of fall under each grouping. I always like to use biomedical science as an easy one, as that first class in that pathway is honors biomed. If that's something you wish to continue with, you would then follow that up with human body systems, then medical interventions, and then hopefully senior year take that medical residency course, if we're thinking more of the health sciences field. So again, really trying to help our students match those career clusters with the pathways that are offered here at the high school, because I think a lot of times students, and in talking with them, have expressed, I didn't realize there were these many possibilities and opportunities of different electives that I could potentially take over the next 3.5 years. Oh, now I'm going to pass it on to my rightful partner, Mr. Boshin.
Thanks, Miss Z. I think last week we had a fall student athlete signing where we had at least 10 kids that were, basically indicating which college they were going to go and study and the scholarships that they had, basically signed on the dotted line for. So we continue to have this growing number of students that are potential student athletes. If your son or daughter is, interested in pursuing or in becoming a student athlete in college, they have a very strict guideline for what students need to do in order to be eligible at that next level. What we've indicated on this slide is just that they need the 16 core courses. And so the way those core courses work, they're typically in English, science, social science, math, and then world language. And you'll see those numbers on this slide as well. Obviously, if there are questions or if this is something that, your student is interested in, have them reach out to one of us. As some of our courses are not NCAA worthy. And so we want to make sure that we are providing that information to potential student athletes to ensure that they're eligible to play their sport wherever they go after McHenry. There is also a GPA and a testing requirement that kind of works as a sliding scale. There's more information to be found on the NCAA website. But like I said, if you have someone that's interested in becoming a student athlete at the Division I or Division II level, or frankly, any of the levels, just have them stop down and we can kind of walk them through that process. With regards to our Distinguished Warrior program, this is something that I'm always amazed at how many students we have that qualify for this program. There's a banquet and there's this recognition. There's also a scholarship that, tends to come out of our Distinguished Warrior program. It's really just a bunch of criteria that students can be striving towards completing over the course of the next 4 years, where, we've been trying to revamp it so that at the freshman level, freshmen are not overwhelmed because there are so many criteria. We want to make sure that the criteria that we're introducing to our freshmen, they're able to do during that school year. But it's things like community service and, getting involved in school, whether that's sports or activities, staying out of trouble. So, no suspensions, and then just earning grades. And so, if you do have more questions about our Distinguished Warrior program, Mr. Iserman is a great contact person for that. However, there is information on our webpage as well. Yes. So our timeline. I know a lot of kids were really, really shocked when we started talking about, courses and careers and all that good stuff in their English classes. It really wasn't until we started to mention that, oh yeah, we're going to be picking your courses for sophomore year in January, that I think some of that information started to click. What you're seeing in front of you now is just our timelines for when course selection process will start. So sometime middle of January, we're going to get in front of all of our students and just kind of, brief them on the new courses, things that they're going to be required to take, and a little bit on those electives. And then, kids are going to be placed in those courses based on first semester grades. So I can't encourage students enough to continue to push through any courses that they're struggling with, maybe utilize some of those resources that Miss Z pointed out in one of the earlier slides, and, continue to just strive to do your best in those courses. The other thing that I do want to mention is that, sometimes students are placed in courses based on grades, based on, test scores, based on a lot of data points. But as parents, and guardians, if you think that your student is going to be stretched a little too much or maybe not enough, definitely reach out to us, as there is a process that we can kind of challenge some of those placements, knowing that sometimes every teacher thinks very highly of students and might think that they are capable of doing an honors course, but not really looking at the big picture. And then the next thing you know, students are recommended for multiple honors courses. We do know that students have a life outside of school, and just want to make sure that, these students are challenging themselves appropriately, and balancing, their outside requirements as well. So definitely reach out if you have questions or concerns about any of the placement issues that take place. I'm going to let Mr. Mankey describe this slide.
Why, thank you, Mr. Boshin. You were generous and kind. So these 4 words on the screen right now, they really kind of capture and represent how people make career decisions. So when the time is right, whether we realize it or not, then oftentimes it's not. These are the 4 things that we kind of put together. And over the next couple of years, the ways in which we will work with your students, especially regarding some of the bigger programming that we'll do. So for instance, it was mentioned that we've been in your students' English classes, a couple of days over the last week. So when we're doing that kind of programming, this is what we're hitting. We're here to help your students be able to self-identify their interests, which are things that they like or that they don't like. And I would argue it's just as important to be aware of what you don't like as it is what you do like. Skills, what are you good at? And conversely, what are you not so good at? So for instance, maybe you're really, really interested in being a firefighter, but you're not very skilled at climbing ladders. Might be something to consider, when you start kind of putting the pieces together. Values, which are quite simply something that is important to you. Is it important that you make a certain amount of money? Is it important that you live a certain lifestyle? Is it important that you live in a certain area? Those kinds of things. And then the last one is personality, which is just kind of like who you are and how you work on a day-to-day basis. And folks, when you can identify those 4 things in yourself, and kind of going with the image that's on this slide right here, when you can identify those 4 things and see where they overlap, that's kind of where you hit the career sweet spot. And that tends to be where people feel more comfortable and confident in making career decisions. And it's much more likely that those decisions lead to long-term career sustainment and success and happiness. So, Mr. Boshin, back to you for this one.
Thanks. You always do such a nice job with that.
I take my inspiration from you, sir.
Well, that's great. So talking a little bit more about potential 4-year college planning, we do get a lot of questions from parents. regarding the courses that students should be taking. I think in the eyes of a lot of our partners, the colleges, they're really looking for students that challenge themselves appropriately. So they're going to be looking at those core subject areas, the English, the math, the science, the social science. Many of those credits go along with our graduation requirements. So students will be taking four credits of English, 3 credits of math, 3 credits of science already to satisfy their diploma requirements. The 3 years of social science credits, we have a 2.5 year credit requirement for graduation. So, it's really taking an additional course. And then we get to the world language, which I know is a big question for families as well. And, there's not a good answer for the world language requirement. It's kind of like a case by case, depending on the schools that your son or daughter is looking at. I know in the state of Illinois, it's kind of like there's not a one size fits all approach to the world language. In the state of Wisconsin, there's only 2 schools that, you don't have to have some type of world language in order to be admitted to within their public school sector. Illinois is a little bit more all over the place when it comes to world language. And so what I would do is I would definitely reach out, to the schools that your son or daughter is interested in and see what they're doing. Because there are some schools that don't have a language requirement to be admitted, but then have a language requirement for graduation purposes. So you have to take that language requirement before you graduate. And it also depends on the program, their course of study, things of that nature that they're pursuing at the college level. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Mr. Menke.
Thank you, Mr. Boshin. As we informed your students over the last couple of days as we've been working with them, anytime they see this orange arrow, that really represents something involving future planning, whether it be next semester, whether it be next year, or whether it be 3.5 years from now. So that's kind of one of the bits that we hope that we've trained your students well on. So again, the orange arrow means something involving the future. Briefly, here's just a couple of ways in which we'll work with your students regarding career development over the next couple of years. We genuinely believe that every student has post-secondary opportunities, and where we come in is that second bullet point there, making sure that they have access to those opportunities. They can identify them, they know what's what, they know when to act, how to act, and if there's a barrier in their way, we can work with them on how to go around that barrier, over that barrier, or even through it if that's the case. We also believe that sustained career success requires getting some kind of training beyond a high school diploma. And I come back to that one actually in the next slide. And that all careers have dignity. Every career has value. Every career has purpose. And what we mean by that is that we're not going to project our values onto your students. It's their lives. It's their futures. We're here to help them eventually make the decision and act on that and be able to self-identify those traits from a couple slides ago. But we're not going to project onto your students what we think they should do with their lives, or if there's a certain route. And ultimately, that's up to them. And that's something that as a team, including parents and guardians, we can work with them on. And the last one there, career development is not linear. It's not a straight line. It's not something we expect a 14-year-old to know. As I shared with most of your students, I was 23 by the time I landed on school counseling. Who am I to tell a 14, 15-year-old, you must have this one career idea in mind that you will then do for the next 40 to 50 years of your life? That's not how career works for most people. It's estimated that on average, folks in this current young generation will have between 6 and 10 career arcs or shifts or evolutions over the course of their adult life. So again, eventually, yes, they will have to make a choice on what their next step is, but in most cases, that next step is not their last step. Right here, this was referred to a little earlier. For those who like things simple, like me, here's the one word that kind of defines how we will work with your student at each of the next 4 grade levels. This year, all we're asking them to do is imagine what's out there, what's possible, what are the options and opportunities. Next year, discover. That's really kind of where we do some of that self-reflection and hit those 4 things: the interests, the values, the skills, the personality. Junior year, we ask your students to explore, kind of take a look at what is outside of these walls, what's within the community, what's outside of the community. What are some possible more specific next steps they could take. And then senior year, folks, that's where it all comes together. And yes, your student will eventually have to make a decision and act on their next step. Quickly, a couple of main resources that you can use along the way. Hopefully, you can use us. We are your go-to resource throughout this process. Every one of our freshmen has a course in Schoology called 2026 Post-Secondary Resources. And in there is our names and contact info, as well as a couple links. There's only a few things in there because folks, as well as we do, even well-intended, if you throw too many resources at people, they get overwhelmed and they don't click any of them. So there's a couple of things here that we have for your students. The second one from the bottom, the course planning guide, that actually has the list of every single McHenry High School course, a description of every course, when you can take them. If there's prerequisites, those courses you got to take before you can have access to them. We even have a section in there that are grouped by career area. So for instance, if somebody's thinking about a career in business, you can go there and take a look at every course we offer that would make sense for somebody going into the world of business, including courses that don't directly involve business. What are some other supporting skills that can help a student going into those areas? The link right there that says MCHS College and Career Guide will actually open up this file for you. These are all hyperlinked to different sections. So for instance, if you're working with if we're working with a student about kind of going back to that topic Mr. Boshin had earlier about being a potential student athlete, then on the right side of the screen, there's a button there for NCAA student athlete eligibility. We would encourage you and your student to check that out. Or maybe you and your student or your student's thinking about options in the military. There's a section in the second column towards the bottom. How in the world do you pay for what's next? And we have a section on the right there, financial aid scholarships. So there's something here for everybody. Odds are most students won't click on all of these over the course of the 4 years with us, but there's at least a couple there that can come in handy for everybody, regardless of what their career ideas and aspirations may be. This slide right here really kind of captures, honestly, the whole purpose of my role in the district, which is to help your students eventually act on what decision, what route they will do next after high school. We summarize these into 4 incredibly broad categories. We have the 4-year schools at the bottom right corner. Last year, 34% of last year's senior class chose that option. So 34% of last year seniors are presently living and learning away from home on campus at a 4-year school. Similar to that is the one in the top left corner. Students who are going to start at MCC, do their freshman and sophomore years there, and then eventually transfer to a 4-year school for their 3rd and 4th year, their junior and senior year. The results between those two are exactly the same, a 4-year bachelor degree from the bigger school. Because folks, what's important is where you finish, not where you begin. And although I think the stigmas are starting to go away with community colleges, I do just pleasantly and gently remind our viewers that community colleges are colleges. They're not less than. As sometimes we tell your students, it's not high school part 2. It's not just there to do something, for the indecisive. For students who attend MCC, they do so purposefully, and they've got all sorts of wonderful programs that can support just about any student's career pathway. We also have in the bottom left military. So 3 to 4% of our students on most years will enlist directly in the military after high school. And in the top right corner, we have a category we define as workforce training. About 15 to 20% of our students every year go that route. That category includes the automotive industry, the manufacturing industry, trades, a lot of careers that involve practical, hands-on, tangible skills. May or may not involve college, but certainly involves more training beyond a high school diploma. Next up, I got one slide on each of these, just given the fact that we're 3.5 years away from taking those next steps. We'll give you the very brief overview on these. Again, once your student gets over to the upper campus, we have military recruiters that will come through the College and Career Center on a regular basis to talk with students that might be interested in what they offer. We also have college representatives come through and career speakers as well, just to give you kind of that overview there. If a student does decide to enlist in the military, one of the actions they'll take is complete an assessment called the ASVAB, because in addition to training your student on how to be a soldier, they will also give training on a particular job. Because just like in civilian life, there's civilian chefs and nurses and firefighters. They also, within the military structure, need chefs and nurses and firefighters as well. And we always encourage students, include your family if you're thinking about this option, just given the magnitude and the commitment involved. Workforce training, one slide on this topic. Apprenticeships are back in full force, folks. And if you live in McHenry County, there are ample opportunities to engage in workforce training. Manufacturing along with healthcare are the two biggest employment sectors in McHenry County. So we're going to lean into those statistics and numbers and make sure that we're offering a variety of options for our students. You can see on the left side there, different ways within the county or the Chicago area where students can go for apprenticeships. On the right side, MCC, yes, they have those transfer programs. What you see here on this slide are non-transfer programs. So students can go to MCC for these programs that are about 2 or so years, sometimes less, and get a non-transfer. They call it an associate in applied science degree in any one of those areas, and then engage in the workforce by the time you're 20 or 21. So again, some of those you can, are pretty much just 2-year programs. There's other ones, like criminal justice, for instance. You can do that career with a 2-year degree. You can do it with a 4-year degree. So some of that kind of depends on the preferences of the students, how much training or education, what kind of training or education they want beyond high school before they take that step into the workforce. This slide is on the transfer process. So this would be, where a student is doing years 1 and 2. Close to home. They're learning in a college setting. They're just living at home. And then they're going to transfer to a 4-year school for years 3 and 4. Cost is usually one of the main factors why students consider this. There's some others there in the bottom right corner of the screen. Sometimes folks just aren't ready to leave home. Sometimes they've got family obligations. Maybe they just think MCC is the right fit for them. One of those are valid reasons. I will briefly say that for MCC, regarding the cost part of this, if you were to go to a public university in Illinois, when you combine your learning expenses, so your tuition as well as your living expenses, your dorm, your meal plan, it's going to cost, before financial aid is applied, at least $30,000. If someone attends MCC for 1 year, they're living at home, and I'm not saying it's free to live at home or that they're not going to accumulate costs for you, but it's probably going to be less than about half of that bigger number I gave you, which is about 15 grand. It costs about $4,000 to attend MCC for 1 year, to learn at MCC for 1 year. And again, you get the same quality education for those first 2 years. And please don't take that as us overly pushing MCC, but again, we mention that just so you're aware of those differences. And so when the time is right, you can make those informed choices. This one is on 4-year colleges. On the left side of the screen are the main factors that 4-year colleges tend to look at when they're evaluating people's application, when they're considering candidates for admission. Folks, grades and GPA tend to be the biggest factor that schools look at. It's not the only one. Most schools will use a word called holistic. We holistically review your students. So yes, grades are typically at the top of the list, but you could see on the screen on both sides there some of the other factors that schools will look at. Some factors schools don't care about. The University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign wants nothing to do with letters of recommendation. So as we tell students, if you send the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign letters of recommendation, you've just now demonstrated that you can't follow directions. So you only want to send schools what they ask for. But you can see the kind of variety of things here. I will point out one thing in the bottom right under the secondary admissions factors. This is one that until probably about 5 years ago would have been on the left side, and that's test scores. Prior to the pandemic, we were seeing a slow trend away from colleges using test scores. We're seeing a slow trend towards students or to colleges going test optional. And if a school is test optional, that means that a student can choose whether or not to send test scores in. So if they believe that their test score would help them with being admitted to a certain school, they can send it. If they won't, then they don't send it. And they can always consult with us on what the right choice is there on a school-to-school, student-by-student basis. During the pandemic, almost every school nationwide went test optional simply because there was a lot of students across the nation who just didn't have access to take a test. Now that we're hopefully post-pandemic here, many schools have chosen to remain test optional. We are seeing in some areas a slow return with some schools to requiring tests. The public schools in Tennessee, for instance, are back to requiring tests. The public schools in Georgia and Florida, many in Texas, are requiring tests. I just read a couple weeks ago that Purdue, which is just a couple hours away there in West Lafayette, Indiana, was starting with, I believe it's the class of 2025, they're going to go back to requiring tests. So again, as you do your research, as you do your thinking, just another little factor to kind of keep in mind. This slide and the next one, I'm trying to work into every presentation that I do, just because making sure students have access to their hopes and their dreams and their goals is one of the biggest factors, one of the biggest things that we will work with your students on. Students who have either a 504 or an IEP, by definition, have a disability. And if they choose to, they can apply for disability services at any public school nationwide, which does include community colleges. Private schools technically and legally don't have to offer disability services because they don't get funding from the federal government. However, most of them do, because they know that if they don't, they're going to lose a large chunk of potential applicants. So if your student has a 504 or an IEP and they want to continue with some kind of service, some kind of accommodation in the college setting, once the time gets closer, we can talk with you about that. But any school that offers services will have some kind of disability office, and that's when you can engage in seeing what they can offer your student. And then this slide right here, about 1 in 3 McHenry High School students qualify as low income. These schools on the screen right now are all of the public four-year universities in Illinois. There's 4 of them total. On the screen there's a couple kind of offshoots as well, but for the most part, we're capturing the 4-year public schools here. Most of them have some kind of program in which, if you're admitted to the school and your family income comes in at or less than a certain number, and usually that number is kind of $65,000 to $75,000 per year, depending on the school, and then they check a few other academic boxes, they might be able to attend that school tuition free. So if your family has financial need, I would strongly encourage you to check out the public schools in Illinois, which also does include MCC, because community colleges are also public schools, and see how we can access that training education as inexpensively as possible. One slide on how to pay for what's next, because I don't want to overwhelm our freshman parents and guardians this early in the process. So on the left side is just a little bit of information on financial aid. Basically, in the fall of your student's senior year, with them, you're going to together fill out a federal financial aid application called the FAFSA. It stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. And basically, you're applying for financial aid from the federal government, the Department of Education more specifically, from the state, and then from any school that your student may consider. There's different types of financial aid. Again, we'll get into that in the future, but just keep that in mind that that's a step that hopefully will reduce or minimize some of those post-secondary costs, and that this is a necessary step that you'll do with your student senior year. On the right side of the screen would be scholarships. That's a word that more people are familiar with. Scholarships, again, are free money. You don't have to pay them back. And then the 3 bullet points under there are the main sources that students find scholarships. There's a few others as well, but these are the main ones. Folks, most scholarship money students earn tend to come directly from the schools themselves. So always check out what the school offers. And MCC, just using them as an example because so many of our students go there, they have over 100 scholarships that they offer every semester, actually, ranging from $500 a semester, which might cover books and supplies, to full rides. And we have had students over the last couple of years win full tuition to full rides to MCC for 2 years. The other sources are local scholarships. That would be organizations within the community or the county who offer money. Most of those come out senior year. And then the last one, national level scholarships. That might be, the Coca-Cola Foundation offers scholarships every year. And that's something that many students nationwide could apply for and be candidates for. And that, folks, is the rest of our formal presentation. We ask our students literally and figuratively, what are you looking forward to? What might be next there? As we pause for a moment here, I'm going to give one more I'll let our listeners and our viewers know, our live viewers, that if you are more than welcome to enter in questions into the chat box or the comment area on YouTube, which is where you're watching this right now. So we will kind of pause and ponder a few things as we give our live viewers a moment to possibly type in any questions that they have into that comment box. If you type it in there, we can see it on our end, and we can give you a live response right here. Mr. Boshin, Ms. Sarignana, what is some general feedback that you could give to our parents right now as they're starting the navigational waters with our freshmen?
I would say that this process really, I know that in the infant stages, it can be seen as like overwhelming, but like I feel like we have a lot of really solid supports and, students that require that additional attention, whether that be hand holding through the application process or, just kind of bouncing ideas off, my door is always open. They can stop in here and we can start that process at any time. I would much rather prefer that they stop by sooner than later. As I'm sure you're well aware, Mr. Mankey, having those seniors in their second semester that are trying to, get their lives in order before they leave us, that can be kind of stressful.
Couldn't agree with you more. Ms. Z, any general feedback or tips that you would leave our parents and guardians with?
Yeah, I mean, just as I think an FYI as well, even though Mr. Bosch and I aren't necessarily traveling with your kids as they move to the upper campus for next year, their new counselors will be with them for the rest of their high school career. And I don't want that to discourage them coming in through the open door policy that we have here, like Mr. Boshin shared about coming and starting those conversations. Our counseling team collaborates very well together. And so, just making sure that if that conversation wants to be started with us, we can definitely share that appropriately with the counselor that your student will be with for the remainder of their 3 years here at McHenry High School. And I think that's going to be very nice and beneficial, so that you kind of have that point person to connect with if you have or need any additional support in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. Well, thank you both for your feedback. I hope our parents find that helpful and welcoming. I'm not seeing any questions come through, so I think we'll wrap things up, folks. For our live viewers, thank you for watching us live. For those watching the recording, we are grateful for you as well. And we'll leave you with that same question that we ask our students. What are you looking forward to? For our live viewers, have a great weekend, and we look forward to working with your students in the months and years to come. Take care.
Take care.
Bye.